I'd like to welcome everyone to the next episode of Unido Talks. Today we have a very special guest. We have the CEO and co-founder of Finder.com, perhaps one of the most successful businesses out of Australia. We have Fred Schebesta with us today. As you know, we have Michael Swan, co-founder of Unido, ex-VP of Goldman Sachs. It's a pleasure to have you guys here with us today. And let's dive right in. Fred, I think to many people in Australia, it's no surprise who you are. You're very well known in the crypto space, and as well as Finder.com being what you call as the Amazon of comparisons. Could you tell us a little bit about your general take of crypto in 2022 as we enter this bear market, and give us your take on the landscape?
Crypto's still booming. You know, engineers are flooding in, projects are being built. I think there's this incredible undercurrent of technology now being created with NFTs and games. There's more things being built rather than less things being built, which is really going to keep that, keep going. The price of Bitcoin, regardless, just sort of where we're at checking in, we're still trading at, I think we touched 18 grand this morning, but we popped back up, but we're still way past where Bitcoin started. If we're going to go back to 1/8 of a cent or something like that, which I think is very unlikely, we're still in a miracle territory. I joined crypto pretty late in 2017, 2018, and I think at its core, I've never seen such a change in I guess from the media, particularly. I think this time they're a little bit hesitant to call it dead or go and the final nail in the coffin, whatever. I've seen some of these articles, but they don't age terribly well. And more and more journalists now are a little bit going, well, I've seen that now blow up, and I don't think I want to be that guy who writes that story again. And so I don't think we've got as much sort of hate going on. I think we've just got genuinely a bank run happening. If you go back to 1907, the panic in Wall Street, JP Morgan came in and basically stabilized the economy, and that actually created the Federal Reserve. It was created straight afterwards. And I think you're in that kind of moment where, at first I think there were some of these anonymous Twitter accounts that were whistleblowing and throwing out some things that potentially could happen. And then, in some ways, a broken clock is right 2 times a day. And in this case, they were right. And now you've got all these other anonymous accounts now popping up, spreading spurious, rumors, and there's no facts or actual data to back much of it up. And that's great. That's awesome to spread that, and you get the attention, and it builds your account, and cool, I get it. Eventually, it's gonna get it'll slow, and people will get a little bored from it, and it's I've heard enough. I'm kind of done. It's this is really harsh, but anytime a major disaster happens the first 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, it's pretty dramatic, shocking. And then unfortunately, as humans, we get bored and we kind of move on, even though the drama and everything still is unfolding and everything's happening. And I think in crypto, that's the same kind of thing here. We're going to move on from this. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep realizing the potential, and just so many amazing things, and creative designers, game developers, engineers, bankers, accountants, just incredible people coming and joining. And my submission is, if you look at the internet, during 2000 and maybe even early 90s, call it around that time, I think we're kind of in that territory. We just had a big washout, but everything's still running. Everything's still going. People are still building. New things are coming out. And the huge amount of funding and money that was raised in that bull market and deployed into new projects, we're going to see those. They take time to come to light, but, and I remember DYDX back in the last one was just a white paper. I remember Chainlink was just a white paper. All these things which are now fundamental things were just white papers. Aave was, bought ETHLend back in the days. And so I think we're about to come into an incredible golden age. It's just going to take time to build a lot of these things. and it'll come flying back. I'm starting to get bullish now because, you know, and you know, for all sorts of reasons, but it's just getting so like getting a bit ridiculous. And when it gets to this phase, then I get really like, wow, this is a good time to start building and buying.
Fred, you're talking about all the innovation being built. What do you feel like are some of the underutilized applications around blockchain that are yet to be built? What areas or what sectors do you think?
So I think that, you know, there were some really interesting rails that sort of came out in the last DeFi real push, and that was between centralized exchanges and decentralized venues, and these sort of fabrics and enterprise technologies. I think those sort of railway lines or webbing, I sort of think of it like webbing between these venues has started to form, and I think that's really interesting. And I think it's kind of undervalued. And I think if, you know, in TradFi, I could imagine that was, you know, some of the banking rails, some of the settlement, some of the custody stuff, you know, to some extent, and that trust that you can actually create a much more liquid and sophisticated set of markets and really those traders can really enter with safety. I think that's kind of major, and I think that will actually start growing. You know, as I talked about the gaming, NFT gaming, I think is massive, and it's, you know, some of the new games that it takes a long time to build a great game, like a really long time, but they're starting to now, you know, you're starting to see a little bit of actually some amazing games starting to come out with some decent gameplay, because what you've got, I think, an issue there is you've got negative sort of a negative loop or a negative value loop in play to earn, right? All the value gets extracted out, unfortunately. And what we need is a game where it's fun enough to play that people will come to play for free, and you'll see a positive loop, a positive value loop starting to be created where people are playing for free. There are other people who are playing to earn, but they're symbiotically working together in some way, shape, or form. And you will start to see, much like, you know, I don't know, this is pretty outrageous, but I'll say it is, in the early days of Diablo and World of Warcraft, you had gold miners, right? And yes, you know, they were there just to mine, sure. But at the same time, you were cool with it. Like, hey, I get it. You're going to mine those things. Then I don't have to. Here's $25. You know, give me the scroll or the thing or the blah, whatever it is. Cool. No worries. I get it. Like, thank you very much for actually solving these challenges and issues to me. But we're living symbiotically. I'm not exactly sure all the actual reasons, and I don't have the depth. And some of them probably should comment in this as to why exactly that didn't stay sustainable. Maybe because it was not endorsed by, you know, Blizzard or whoever it may be. And I don't know the intricacies, but everyone knew it. Everyone was fine with it. And that's where we need to get to. Like, we want to go and, you know, have that nice balance. And I think we're going to start to get there. And I do think that this is a beautiful place where micropayments for those kinds of transactions can easily and seamlessly take place. You know, whereas you've got these credit cards, you know, the sort of clunky transactions and things like that happen without crypto. This is a place where I think, you know, it's really neatly all bundled together. And I do think we're starting to see the beginnings of a much more sophisticated and advanced set of games and ecosystems around it.
It sounds like you're talking about like protocols like Alluvium or Immutable X, these protocols that have product first approaches to really great products, and then the value will come later.
Yeah, I think they are part of it. I think that there's a tying together, you know, and just for transparency, I'm working with an NFT gaming platform called Balthazar, and they've got a really interesting vision to sort of package up a lot of these components for the games, so they can focus on making great games, and then Balthazar provides the platform to do all the blockchain and other components. But like at its core, you know, NYC NFT was just on, and a lot of the games I think are, you know, sort of in a place where it's like, hey, you know, we're not exactly sure about this stuff. Like, this is relatively new. The great game developers and designers are coming into the space going, whoa, look at this new component. This is pretty intense. Hey, what's the deal with this? How do we best set this up? And then you've got the blockchain side of people, engineers, product managers, developers, projects going, hey, we've got these great technologies, where can we actually put them? And then you've got this beautiful marrying together that's starting to happen. And I think that's where, we'll start to see a lot of new, just like fundamental use cases of blockchain and crypto, where it's a beautiful meshing together.
So Fred, how much of your time, percentage-wise, would you say you're allocating towards your crypto projects, and how much are you focusing on Finder? Or are you trying to sort of marry your crypto endeavors into Finder as well?
It's day to day, but I'd say at least 60 to 65% in crypto. Yeah, I'm fascinated by it. And we've got, Finder's got Finder Earn, where we provide 4% on your capital. We're just launching new coins. So you can trade in the Finder app. We're building Finder Finance, which has got this incredible place that'll have like stocks and crypto, and all of our real media and content teams are sort of going to rally underneath that banner. So we're continuing to invest. We've been investing in this area since 2017 in Finder, and I don't think it's something we're going to slow down, regardless of the market. We built all through 18 and 19 on Finder. We kept on building. We're translating some of our content now into different languages. That's really hard, by the way, really hard. To get the context and the nuance and the. I know it sounds easy, but it's actually not easy at all. Particularly because I speak really bad French and my Chinese is horrible. And so it's hard for me or anyone else in the company to give a lot of context or quality control or help. We're very reliant on those teams and what they do. And they're incredible teams, but we're just trying to find and help more audiences and help more people understand this space. And it's really interesting because we're still so early. Still people are still learning. I'm going to conferences and teaching people and doing talks on it. What's an NFT? Why does Bitcoin have any value at all? And just really quite, I still think there's a huge new audience that's going to come in. And so, in some small way, I hope every business in crypto benefits from, those things I do in some way, shape or form. And I just try and break it down and keep it simple, but I think it's growing the industry.
And what is it about crypto that excites you the most when it comes to the technology? Is it the interoperability, the transparency, the efficiency? What is it that really scratches the itch for you?
This is it's unusual. I was reminiscing the other day when I got into crypto and someone sent me, I think it was like $25 of Bitcoin, and I was just like, and I think it was the weekend, and I was just like, how did you, what? You get that first miracle moment when you realize that you can send sovereign value to someone without a bank. It's just baffling, and I forget that, it takes and I remembered it and I was like, wow, I do remember that feeling. And that was an incredible, and then, you go down the rabbit hole and you go deeper and deeper into all the intricacies. I think the part that I love and, I need to get better at, but is the marrying of the marketing, the finance, and the tech in one. So there are three areas that I personally love: marketing, public relations, both things I love. Technology, I was a coder, a really bad coder, just so everyone knows, without to remove any doubt, but just dangerous enough so I could, code some things together. They worked, but they weren't necessarily scalable, but they got the point across. And I used to code the first Finder website, just hand code it, and I didn't know any frameworks or anything like that. But it got the point across, right? It got the job done. So I intimately respect the science and really the architectural and engineering mind of an engineer or a coder. It's and particularly in crypto, it's quite artistic in terms of what you need to do, because you're kind of creating patterns. You're creating. You're kind of like, normally, when you build something, you can sort of reference a framework or reference some people that have potentially done something, and you can kind of riff on it a little bit, but it's well trodden path. Whereas I think in crypto, you've got kind of the machete out and you've got an overgrown forest in front of you, and you're the one that has the arrows in your back from the natives, and you've been cutting out, and you've got all the pine and the scratches and the snakes bitten you, and then the next person comes through and goes, oh, that's pretty not so bad. Then the next person, and then the 10,000th person who builds the highway or through that particular trench that you've created, they have a different experience. And so, I admire the pioneers, and I think that's what's incredible. And I think finance, in that sense, I didn't realize the depth of finance. I had no idea. And I think in crypto, you basically get an investment banking course in kind of 3 to 6 months, where you go from a project not existing to raising money to listing to dying and then wiping out, and then everyone reboots and starts again. Like in traditional markets, that's kind of like maybe a 3-year, 2-year process. This is like 3 months and suddenly you're trading and you're live. Like, that's insane. It's fun, right? So to quote, I don't know if this is the exact quote, but it's something I thought was interesting. I watched, and this is very rare for me, but I'll share this. It's probably a damaging confession, but I watched all the episodes of Black Sails, which is a pirates a TV series on Netflix. And I'm not saying this is probably going to win any Academy Awards or anything like that, but I've always sort of loved pirates and their concept, and they had this idea of a free world outside of in the new world being free, and all the parallels of crypto I felt were kind of coming through in a way. In the very last episode, and I won't spoil it for anyone, but there is a section where one of the characters talks about what's in this place, like what's in the undiscovered, what is here, and that is where the new things get created. This is where invention happens, when it's outside of the walls and the barriers and the rigidness of thinking, of rule, of standardization, which creates stability in civilization. Outside of that, and that's where I feel what is so exciting about crypto is you're inventing where there is no, where it's dark. It's in the darkness where you're creating light, and I think that's amazing.
If crypto are the pirates, does this make the traditional banking system the Navy or something? Michael? Would that be would your experience be as the British Navy or something?
I was just laughing at your example. Look, it's pretty interesting. Fred's observations are very similar to mine, and we come from 2 different backgrounds. I mean, people are still building projects. At Tokenomic, the VC, we get new white papers and pitch decks every week at a similar velocity that we were getting 6 months ago. The folks are out there and still building because there is a future. And we've seen well, you see most ecosystems which don't necessarily rely or relate to Bitcoin, and it's quite funny, why do altcoins crash when Bitcoin crashes? Now, it usually comes, there are some market forces, but it usually comes down to sentiment, right? Because Bitcoin is the proxy for all cryptocurrencies and all blockchain survivability. If Bitcoin crashes, so does blockchain, or the sentiment of its future. The funny thing is, we could not have Bitcoin at all, and we could have fantastic ecosystems which solve real-world problems, and there's no correlation between Bitcoin and using those ecosystems. And I think that's the attitude that folks are taking as they build out, that Bitcoin will do what Bitcoin's going to do, price-wise. We solve a real problem, and because it's blockchain, it's scalable. So let's power ahead, and that's what we've seen in the market today, right? And I really like the example of the unknown and what can be done when you remove yourself from the current constraints of a financial system which relies on, banks which are entrenched. Well, scrap the banks. Let's start from scratch. And then if you've got a blockchain where the rules are too stringent, people are creating new blockchains which address the whole. It's this level of innovation that blockchain in general is providing, and these non-crypto uses of blockchain, like Katrina, Civic Ledger with the water rights. It's a great example, but it's just one example. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It solves a real world issue, and I think it comes down to, and Fred said this right at the start, this is an education issue rather than a market dynamics or a need for these products. This is an education issue for us to make these things go mainstream. Once we can remove, crypto and blockchain out of the shadows. And I know Jamie Dimon said that this crypto was only ever, or Bitcoin was only ever used for buying drugs, and get rid of this nonsense that this is a legitimate payment platform. And it's built on technology which has survived many crashes well over a period of a decade. This is an education issue, and as we've got folks like Fred who are out there talking and trying to get people in, and it's not this crazy crypto, sounds undercover, to this is a legitimate, it's an efficient, it's transparent beyond any other payment system. You can see what happened with payments. You can see who initiated it, where the money went, and did it hit. Once we get people's education levels up around this on a global scale, try telling me this isn't the future of finance, let alone the future of digital delivery for plenty of products. The tokenization access for real-world access, for real-world products. Tokenizing coffee, or gold, or real estate, or NFT for seats on an airplane. There are so many non-Bitcoin uses here. That's why we're going to see blockchain survive. And this stuff around Bitcoin, the price volatility, as you said, it started at 0.8%. I think they were first on record trading. We've taken a hit this year. We took a hit last year, and then the end of July, powered on, projects kept coming up. It's market dynamics, things move. There's no death of blockchain here, though.
When do you guys think we're going to see that decoupling of Bitcoin leading the value of all other altcoins or all other cryptocurrencies?
That's going to take a while. So I think let's go back to 1694. 1694, the Bank of England was created, and it lent the English government £1.2 million to finance its war with France. And for that loan, it was enabled and allowed to print the money, and also basically it gave a temporary monopoly to the Bank of England to print the money. Before that, money was printed by many banks. Many banks all around England printed money. Many banks around the world printed money. And if you go to Hong Kong today, you've got 3 different banks printing the money: HSBC, Standard Charter, and Bank of China. And that's actually the free banking is actually the natural state of things. But what was this money printed for? Well, you would take your gold or and you would go to the bank and say, hey, can you hold this for me and give me an IOU? And that will enable me to go and transact in smaller sums and more conveniently, as opposed to I went to a gold trade show, and I was you could hold the power of gold, and gold is like insanely heavy. Like for its size, it's like cumbersome, and I had no idea it was that difficult to actually go and utilize, right? And so I think Bitcoin over time will get to that point as well, where you just won't really send Bitcoin around. It'll just be settled through IOUs in some way, shape, or form. And I do think it will become very stable in price. This is going to take a long time, no doubt. And then you'll start to see other currencies that represent that, or in some way, shape, or form are backed by that in some percentage way or format. I think this is probably very controversial, but I think Terra tried to do that in some way, shape, or form. I think Tron, Justin's trying to do this with his USDD to some extent, and backing it up with 14,000 Bitcoin, and he's got USDC in there as well, and USDT and Tron. But I just think that and I'm sure, Michael, you would have seen this. They really telegraphed what they were going to do, and when you do that in traditional markets, people come and topple things because there's a lot of money and profit in that. And I'm of the belief that's what sort of you can sort of see what started in there. There was a lot of contagion, and I don't think they realized how strong market forces can be when there is a lot to be gained. But I do think some of those ideas which were tried and tested and maybe didn't quite work out this time, they just need, again, it's just where innovation happens, right? Massive failures happen all the time. And classic example, right? I know people talk about, Betamax and VHS, right? Like, so to remove doubt, Betamax came first, but the reason why Betamax actually got shot down is that it got sued by the movie studios. Movie studios sued Sony into the ground, and it basically they tapped out. And then the movie studios went and partnered with the new version, and they got on board and they made VHS. So like, this is not to say that the first one didn't sprout a really good idea, and then obviously once they got on board and they got their cut of this new thing, and everyone got cool, then you've got this creation of the video recorder, which is a miracle again of to be able to record things. I think that's the kind of angle, and then you might see coins that represent something to do with Bitcoin or some stable aspect to it in some way, shape, or form. I don't know the exact, the spirit of it is there, and the possibility. And if you go back to the original Bitcoin Talk forums, you can see, posts there talking about this idea in the original Bitcoin when it was being, kicked around. It's just that iteration of what that version is and how it looks needs more thought and more rigor and more testing. But I think then you will start to see some of those stable coins and other things be bigger in market share than potentially in Bitcoin. That just, its version and how it looks and how its iteration, how it goes, I'm not sure. But I think there may be some point in time when that will happen. It's just going to take a long time.
Fred, I have a little bit of an off-the-wall question. I know you have quite a big presence on TikTok, and you speak a lot about crypto there. Do you see that being a new avenue where information is being given about crypto, and what are your feelings on crypto TikTok?
Yeah, so I actually had dinner with the founder, with Yi Ming of TikTok, or you could say ByteDance in China, this week, and it was really interesting to talk to him about his views and where it's going. And I know like what we see in TikTok is not the full version in China, is much more intricate. There are people teaching biology on ByteDance, which is TikTok in China, like full biology. There are people teaching people to dance. There are people teaching people. There are full 20-minute cut up little series of TV shows. The content creation of that platform, I think, is actually there to rival YouTube. And its educational aspect it will come through. And I do think the age range is going. I guess I'm a little early because I'm trying to teach crypto on TikTok, and that feels weird to a lot of people who think of the dancing and the skits and the comics. But I believe that's actually the intention, and where ByteDance intends it to be is a platform to teach and learn, because that format, the micro learning, the nano learning, and those small moments where you get to the point quickly and teach people love that. They get past all the jokes and stuff and the thirst traps and things like that to eventually go, hey, can you teach me something? And the algorithms are built in such a way that eventually they want to give you something different, that you go, hey, actually I'm not wasting my time. I don't want to just kill this app because it's a black hole. I want to actually learn and engage. And I think that's when that tipping point hasn't quite happened on TikTok. It definitely has happened on ByteDance, and maybe in some way, shape, or form, I'm a bit early in that, and I'm normally a little too early in my forecasts, so I just have to hold normally. So right now I'm hodling my TikTok crypto because I think it will be a platform of education and learning, and I'm just a little early. The age range is increasing. And as more and more educational content starts to come out, people will see it as not just a dancing place, but yes, it's an actual place of learning. And I believe the stat they said there is 10 million active users a month on TikTok in Australia. 10 million. That's a big number. Obviously, that came from them, not from me. But I do believe that's a significant audience. And yeah, if you can get a little, my videos aren't as popular as I'm trying, but they're just, yeah, there's still probably a relatively younger audience that likes the sort of the entertainment and you know, the dating and the pranks and, you know, and YouTube was a lot like that, right? You know, you go back in time, you remember YouTube was like, you know, exactly the same. And now you go, you know, if you want to learn something, like, I think last night I went to YouTube first and I typed in how to make an open toasted sandwich because I wanted something, you know, decent, and I wanted to do it in a decent way. And I'm a terrible cook and I try and feed my 3 children as best I can. But you know, there are things you know you have mastery in and things I'm not as good. So, but you know, that kind of query in YouTube before probably would have gotten me something, you know, sort of what 5 years ago would have been something where people were smashing sandwiches in people's faces. Whereas now, you know, I got some decent ideas and I was like, oh, actually, that's how you're supposed to do that. Thank you. You know, and I made some, you know, relatively decent sandwiches.
I'd love to take the conversation towards small and medium-sized enterprises, since that's specifically what Unido is servicing. Where do you see the trends amongst small and medium-sized businesses? What do you see their pain points as, and where do you see them heading towards, Fred?
So I assume you mean just in general?
Yeah. In small, medium-sized enterprises holding assets, their pain points of entering into crypto.
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of them custody and, you know, holding the asset in some way, shape or form. You know, everyone's got super enough messaging and about security and cyber security. Everyone's scared about that to a large degree. And I think it's hard to scale and do that kind of stuff in a quick and easy way. I think that's probably one place to start. I think then, you know, it's a relatively being okay and comfortable as to what places or venues are okay to use, or some sort of vetting or some sort of, you know, that's actually relatively hard to do as well. I've heard of some really smarts around, you know, people who look at smart contracts and try to benchmark, you know, the different actual. They can see, you know, it's that a smart contract is a clone of Uniswap, for example, and then they just look for the actual tiny little differences, and then based on that, they can assess the risk of the smart contract and therefore the risk of the venue to some extent. Stuff like that. That's pretty sophisticated technology, but I do think that's another component. I think then, you know, some of the internal controls about who's controlling what, you know, because you know, sometimes, you know, one person leaves in a small to medium business and that can, you know, be pretty devastating. So what would you call that? Shared access, or, you know, multi-sig to some extent. You know, I think that they're sort of some of the things, wallets to some extent. There are some good technologies out there, some good companies as well that are doing, you know, really solving a lot of these problems. They're not. I don't think it's easy. It's not a standard toolbox yet. I remember when 2001, I used to build websites, and we used to just literally hand code. We'd start a Notepad. That's a Windows product, but and we would literally roll from there, right? We would literally open the HTML tags, close them, and then start rolling a website, and that's it, right? There was no, there's nothing to. You know, there's no WordPress, no, you know, Squarespace, no jQuery, no. I don't think jQuery is used anymore. You know, these sort of fundamental templates, they were not, you know, in existence, and so I still remember connecting up POP3 accounts for mail and pointing domain names at things and doing, you know, waiting for the 7 name servers around the world to propagate, and you could wait, you know, 2 to 3 days. Now you build a domain name, put it up, and up it goes. You know. Those kind of things, I think, is where we're at still, you know, and I think the technologies and the companies now that are solving these things and standardizing them, they will be the big winners. They'll be the picks and the shovels that everyone uses. They'll be the Levi Strauss of the mining industry.
I don't think we prepped you on any of this, but that custody and having custody of your own assets is exactly what Unido is doing. So it's so funny that that's what you mentioned, that's a big pain point for small and medium-sized businesses. We're still so early that businesses are not fully aware yet that they need those solutions.
Yeah, I agree. And I mentioned that Levi Strauss idea, like, you know, the Strauss brothers, one of them went to the mine, to the gold fields, and literally made, you know, all the miners' pants were breaking. And then, you know, he brought this denim, I think it was. And, you know, that became what the miners used, right? And then when they came back, and the factory workers and everyone who came from the minefields were wearing these, everyone was wearing denim. It became this cheap, extremely sturdy material, and I think all of humanity has benefited from that invention. It was not a popular thing, it was not cool. I think that became the standard. I think about Coca-Cola. In the beginning, during World War II, I think it was, I can't remember it wasn't Patton. I think it was the president said, I want every GI to feel a bit of America everywhere they go, and so every GI had a Coca-Cola, and so that enabled them to make bottling plants all around the world, and they really expanded, and that's why Coca-Cola's logistics network, it's really a logistics company, right? It's not just it's a very popular drink, but its logistics are insane, and then it just keeps loading more and more products into this railway line. I think, I don't know forgive me, Michael, I don't know all of Unido's business, so please forgive me, but it seems to me like custody assets is the railway lines, and people will just go, well, that's the standard, that's what you use. And those opportunities exist now, and they don't exist those exist, few and far between when there are major, innovations that create entire ecosystems, and then there are no those things get nailed in. They become calcified into the skeleton of that industry, and I think those are rare moments in time, and I think that's where we are. And you got to be brave, and you got to deal with the arrows in the back and the machetes, and you got to probably rebuild your system 6 or 7 times and pay down all the debt of the things you thought we needed that you didn't need, and I think that's hard, right? That's what those pioneers deserve, but they go and deal with that innovation, pay down the technical debt, and continuously innovate because of the changing nature of the underlying needs of the customers, which those customers probably, you go and ask them what do they need, they say, I don't really know, you tell me what we might need. And so you kind of like sitting together doing the creation, and so I think that those spoils go to those people brave enough to, you're investing in things which don't necessarily produce revenue immediately, and so you're taking risks that other companies don't need to, where they have a straight line to increasing revenue, and whereas you need to take risks and find problems and put capital and assign developers to them. And maybe those things work out and maybe they don't. I think about NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA started building its own library to control, the actual shapes. You go back in time, you remember graphics were all sort of stuck on. They didn't move with the shadows. If the light changed, it didn't really change. They built an entire library where no one else was doing this, right? No one else was. They built the library. They put it out there. They said, hey, I've got this new library. You want to build on our graphics cards? Like game developers, we've built this thing, without a game to build on your thing. We said, hey, you can now control the shadows and make the light really cool, and those kind of things. Like that's craziness. But then it became, that's the way you do those things. And obviously the GPU, and that's a big thing to say, by the way. There was only the CPU, but the GPU, the graphics processing unit, has become a thing, right? And that's where games now process these matrix calculations, where prior, that was never thought of. The CPU did everything, and the GPU was just a fun little add-on that did a few things, but not to the level it's doing now. And I think that's the same thing. I think there's this sort of industry forming underneath the GPU that was non-existent and now has become existent, and I think that's probably where a lot of these tools are, and I admire that. I admire the risk taking and the capital allocation, because every day you don't know all the changes or intricacies, and sometimes it goes with you and sometimes it doesn't. But that's the nature of being a pioneer.
Michael, do you have anything to chime in on that about pioneering something, tools that are not yet needed but will be in the near future?
Mate, I'm just nodding along with what Fred said. Now, as you know, I came from a banking background, so you get to see the problems with banking, and I got involved in blockchain in 2019, so I was even later than he was. through seeing not only investment banking, but even just the global payment rails and what's lacking. Innovation is born through necessity. The pain points that we experience from day to day as a global bank, but also the individuals. I've spoken about tokenomic, having to pay a BVI lawyer and having to send a multi-leg SWIFT transfer via US, Puerto Rico, and then down to a Gibraltar bank. And the biggest commercial bank in Australia wouldn't do a multi-leg SWIFT because there's too many risks that one of the banks in between will lose the money. That's an individual pain point. The common solution to immediate settlement and direct transfer is crypto. So I saw that straight away, and I thought, well, this is an emerging industry. It solves a real issue that I personally experienced, let alone what I see through, my experience in banking. It takes bravery for not only for us to develop the gear, but for businesses to go down the education path and to actually spend time and invest in crypto. And I don't mean buy crypto, I mean the infrastructure. We've talked about custody, and that's obviously where we started with Unido. Whether you're holding Bitcoin or you're having digital utility assets and you need to operate on smart contracts, you need to, at the end of the day, possess or have custody over the private key which relates to those assets. So for me, that was a no-brainer. This is critical infrastructure in a bull or a bear market. You have to be able to sell your Bitcoin to get your USTD to come off risk, or vice versa when you're ready to ramp up again. It's critical infrastructure, and this is what I think we need to get out to the broader marketplace, getting on top of what crypto is and the infrastructure you need. Folks who haven't got a wallet and don't know what a wallet is, for that matter, in a couple of years when this is mainstream, and we've heard all the examples of the utility coins, how you can be part of membership programs, or you use it to pay things if you're going to buy tokenized assets. Where are you going to put these things? On a thumb drive in a drawer somewhere, or are you going to have appropriate infrastructure for your business? These are problems that folks should be, if you're not taking steps to solve now, understand why you're going to have to do it in a few years. The education path, we keep talking about education, people understanding the scope of what blockchain can do, and demystifying that it's this scary coin for underworld use. Education is key here, and I think that's the exciting part of anything. When you're a developer, you can develop the tools, but if people don't know they need the tools, then you don't go very far. This, first and foremost, is an education matter, hence the point of Unido Talks and all the conferences that Fred speaks at. It's a matter of preaching the case that it's not something scary, and wow, you can add a lot of efficiency and transparency to what you do and deliver better client outcomes. And as a consumer, when you take control of your own assets, and I mean, we've seen some scary examples over the last couple of weeks of exchanges, I won't say bankrupt, but having liquidity issues, shall we say, that's holding your assets elsewhere. The benefits of being able to control your own destiny, take control of your own finances. That's what's exciting here, and that's something we haven't seen in a very long time with the nature of the banking system in Australia, but globally. People really to take control of their own finances and not be limited by a product suite that a bank offers. That's what's exciting, and that's why I got involved in the first place. Pain points, and taking control of my financial destiny, at least.
Now, what is it about? It seems like there's so much progress being made out of Australia. What would you attribute that to, Fred? Why is it so many innovations are coming out of Australia as opposed to other countries?
Well, I think you've got relatively pro governance. You've got some clarity, or at least some good clarity from the tax office and other ASIC, Austrac, the Reserve Bank, and you that's a good foundation, right? It's a good environment. In the US, for example, and I'll just take note of some. You've got I'd say a lot more enforcement, regulation from enforcement And that's scary, and it creates instability, and it makes it unreliable and tough, right? To conduct commerce when you're looking over your shoulder 1 minute and you're creating something remarkable, but at the same time you're kind of worried you're going to get shut down. And so I do think that a lot of Australian crypto companies have got a great environment, a great infrastructure, a great governance, a great roadmap to that as well. And Andrew Bragg, one of the ministers here, has really pushed that as well, that agenda, and held a great inquiry. So that's kind of remarkable, right? Like not all governments have that level of understanding and drive. And I'm not saying everything's perfect, no doubt. It's very hard to get a bank account in Australia if you're a crypto company. A lot of the banks shut you down, unfortunately. That's a fact, and that was raised in the committee hearings as well. And I don't think it's controversial to say that people have received letters and they get their bank accounts shut down. There's no doubt. But that's fair as well, right? I can understand that, and that's their decisions. And like, I actually empathize with the banks because they're the first fintechs. They took us out of the little pieces of paper and went from into like literally big thick books to where you would underwrite in the book because you would write underneath someone else's writings, and they took us to the modern age, right? They're the first financial technology companies. They built little apps and websites, and I admire them, right? And I think we need to remember where we come from to know what we can build upon today. And I do think that there's probably going to become some harmony between the two. You've got one of the major banks here in Australia built a stable coin. Like, that's a pretty provocative thing for a major bank to do, right? Like, you just think that's beyond adoption. That's actual creation and innovation. That's capital assigned to someone coding something. Yeah, it's on a private blockchain. Yeah, there's all sorts of things to it. But so what? Like, that's an acknowledgement. That's moving forward. So given that, I think you've got a very reliable, good system in that sense. And then there are some quite good technology companies in Australia that have, helped to grow and create a lot of engineering here. And you've got a new technology. So those two things combined together, you've got, the makings of engineers that are going to create something. You've got an R&D tax scheme where, you invest and 42 cents in the dollar can go back to the people who invest in engineering projects. It's just good environment, right, for building stuff. And I think of this cryptocurrency movement in just the same way as the internet being created, right? I remember when people started building websites, and yeah, a lot of those technologies and big companies that eventually, took advantage of that and were the winners. They were just in very early, and they had very simple, good ideas. They weren't like crazy, remarkable engineers. They came afterwards, and then they made those systems much more rigorous and robust. But I think you've got the appetite in Australia to build upon this financial rails, governance, and I'd say a relatively fledgling VC ecosystem of funding. I don't think a lot of the projects funding in Australia is coming necessarily out of Australia for these kind of projects. I think it's probably actually coming from outside of it. And because you've seen that, then other people from, Singapore, Hong Kong, and funds in Europe as well are putting money into Australian projects because it's like a relatively stable, safe place. There's a judicial system that you can kind of back, and so I think that's a great environment, right? It's a good trade-off, and it's very close in time zone to the Philippines. COVID flattened the world, right? It used to be a disadvantage to be in Australia, but COVID flattened the world. Now being on a Zoom is, and that's what all Australians were permanently on Zoom and web calls before that anyway, and we just everyone started doing what we were doing. It's like we were on the uncool network, the uncool place, and then everyone came and joined us because you were 22 hours to Europe and 15 hours to LA and another 21 to New York, right? So it was just, this is normal for us to some extent conducting commerce, and now what you've got is a level playing field, right? So you've got a different ballpark, and I think that's probably why Australia is probably one of the beneficiaries in in through this, and from an environment. If you're a coder or an engineer or someone in finance, you spend your day, you work really hard on your project, on your business, and then you literally go to the beach. Like, that's what we do. Everyone in Australia is at the beach all the time, except when it's cold. And even when it's cold, the water for some reason stays warm, right? Like, people in the north of Australia don't even own jackets. That's a pretty cool way to run a flat, now level playing field company, which, Australia's got plenty of space and plenty of beauty, and so people like to come here and live and enjoy the lifestyle.
For listeners who may just be getting into crypto, right? This, say a year from now, people who are just finding out crypto and they listen to this podcast, what are some, because you both are venture capitalists, you finance projects, what are some words of advice and methods that you guys use when assessing new protocols or projects that you're looking to invest in?
The analysis doesn't even necessarily get to a technical layer. You ask fundamental questions. What does the project solve? Is what they're solving solved by others? Or is this something totally new? What's the scalability of it? Is it a very niche problem, or would a lot of people like to have this problem solved? And then you have a look at the credentials of the project. Typically, you're led by the team. Can they deliver? Are they all out of university, or is this an experienced team? There's one thing building a smart contract and associated app. There's another getting folks on board and user and getting the users on. So what their experience is in bringing ideas to an actual enterprise and taking off. And then the basic merits of the team beyond that. Are they financially savvy? At the end of the day, teams often succeed or fail. Projects do based on the team. If you've got a really hungry team that know what they're doing and they're experienced, and the basis of the token was good, they'll get there. If there's issues, they'll navigate them because they've seen issues before. If you've got inexperienced teams that have a great idea and they're all very smart guys but no experience, it's a risk. It's not to say that they can't do it, but it's an unknown issue. You can spend all day how to do valuation for projects. You usually do comp analysis, comparables of what else is out there, and then look at what the discount is depending on how far along the roadmap they are. But typically, when projects launch, $6 million valuation seems to be the magic number for a white paper and a clever idea in a team. The analysis doesn't get much further unless I see a valuation from the start at $1 billion. I must say I would balk at that, regardless of how popular the blockchain is that they're going on. You're playing in the early stages if you're in the private rounds where your money's on risk before you hit TGE, then whatever agreed lockups that you are put into. So it's a risk period over a time period. So if you take your fundamentals away of, can the team do it? Does it solve a real issue? Or is it just a novelty? We've seen so many projects which are clones of old ones on a new chain, for instance. Does, because it's on a new chain, fundamentally make this so much better than what else is out there? Now, that's a subjective question. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. You use your experience and you have a look at what's happened in similar projects. But my number one thing is there a fundamental benefit for having this versus the comparable projects, or is it a project for a project's sake? Just assess what they're solving. Does it deserve to be solved? And is there anyone else solving it? 3 main questions.
Fred, same question for you. When you're assessing a new project to people just getting into crypto, what are some things they should be looking for?
No, I think Michael's points are really good, around the team. It's critical. And it's much easier to invest behind someone who's scaled and built a company before, right? And it's quite a journey. And that comes down to, there's a big difference between 5 people, a 25-person company, a 50-person, 100, a 200, a 500, 1,000, 2,000, a 10,000 person organization. That has a lot of challenges, and in each of those phases, right? To get output and efficiency and to get an actual enterprise moving and align people into a common goal. It's a lot of work. I think that the one thing I try and think about, if I was going to ask a question, or I guess this is, what are you working on that no one else is? What are you working on, or what are you doing that no one else is doing? It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have something immediate. Like, it's a hard question to answer, right? It's like, because most people are like, yeah, pretty much everything that most people can talk about. And very rarely do you come upon something that no one has done in humanity or thought about or some way, shape or form, right? It's normally some sort of iteration or a stretching of what has been done. And, Henry Ford didn't invent the combustion engine. He didn't invent coking of coal. He didn't invent rubber wheels. He didn't actually invent the car. There were plenty of cars around when he was around. He just put it into a nice organized line that moved forward at a consistent pace, and that humans could come and organize themselves around to produce them in a very standardized way. And that's a system, right? It's like similar to McDonald's. There were plenty of other burger shops around. So what is it, I think, just like Michael said, what is it that you're doing that no one's doing? And then I think the next question apart that is that actually valuable? Like, you could be doing something that no one else is doing, but actually, you're the one who's putting avocados in milkshakes, and everyone's like, I'm not into it. Yeah, no one else is doing it. Great, but there's probably a good reason for that, right? And I think that's a really hard assessment, but that's what taking those bets and making those calls are what great venture capitalists do. That's what makes them great. I interviewed Tim Draper. I sort of have a little YouTube channel. It's not big, it's small, and I interview people. And I asked him, I said, Tim, what's the greatest category of growth that you've seen in the many years of investing? What's the category that you've done so well in? What's coming up? What's going on? He said, Fred, actually every category that I actually titled and named would perform the worst. The actual best category was the other, the miscellaneous. And I think what's instructive about that, right, is something that no one else is doing, but a lot of people provide and see value in that, but at the same time a lot of those things start off being as though they're a joke or a toy. And if that's a lot of what crypto was like, it was seen as a joke or a toy, but now and a great example of that was the Nintendo. The Nintendo was seen as a child's toy that people mucked around with and played with, but obviously it has become and continues to be a much bigger platform than that. And I think that's they're the things, if you can try to stitch together with the let's call it 7% of information that you can see about the future, that about the team, that you see their forecasts, really their guesses, and you need to, in some way, shape or form, try and make a good decision about allocating the capital to that project. And that's what's weird is I've seen great teams just unfortunately not produce much, and then okay teams with just like a business idea that a ham sandwich could run. They're the kind of businesses that are pretty good.
I apologize, you guys. I literally lost power on the entire block of my neighborhood in the middle of that. So it's not even just my house. So I do apologize.
I was speaking the entire time, Joseph, so I apologize if I went on too long as well. That's
I know that we're running up on an hour anyway, so this actually works out all right. I want to respect both of you guys' time. So Fred, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Unido Talks. And everyone, I encourage you to go live that Fred has written. It's an incredible book for young entrepreneurs, anyone aspiring to accomplish their goals. It's an awesome book. And be sure to check out all of Fred's info and the details down below. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for another episode of Unido Talks.